lead us.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. I don't need that mic, I guess. Thank you all for coming, some familiar faces, and thank you for coming out during your finals weeks, which are quickly approaching. I am a grad student at Boston University, so I am familiar. And take a few deep breaths because you're not getting a PowerPoint presentation today. I'm sorry. I know you're familiar with doing those too, but as Sarah mentioned, I am indeed a co-founder of Follow the Honey Tanzania, which is a human rights honey company, which we co-launched in Tanzania just last summer. I spent my spring and summer in Tanzania working with local partners there and really basically launching a joint venture between a Tanzanian beekeeping supply company, National Beekeeping Supplies, and Follow the Honey US. So Follow the Honey Tanzania was meant to be a bridge between the production side and the marketing side, with National Beekeeping Supplies helping with the production and training, and Follow the Honey helping with the techniques of quality control and shipping all the way to marketing, and not just in Tanzania, but in the US as well. So with that said, we do everything from interact with beekeepers to meeting with political partners and development banks, trying to figure out projects, financing, and also learning about quality control, dealing with regulations and regulators, registering facilities with the FDA, and actually our first shipment of Tanzanian honey, which we've been working to get into the US, just arrived in December and was also cleared by the FDA in that same time frame. So that's now available, and we will also be doing a honey tasting a little bit later if you guys are interested in that at all. But yeah, we'll run a little video here about sort of Follow the Honey Tanzania. It's kind of quick. It'll be about 6 minutes, just photos and a little bit of video in between, showing what I was up to in my experiences over the summer and spring in Tanzania, and a little bit of some of the other partners. And then I will talk a little bit more about my background getting involved with Follow the Honey, and I will open it up for more specific questions from you, kind of about whatever you want to talk about. It could be anything from bees and the bee issue that you're hearing probably a lot about in the US. It can be about international travel. It can be about how you decide what you want to do after school. It's really open for you guys to ask. The floor will be for you, and I will try to answer that as best I can. So as far as this, we'll run this, and I will try to narrate a little bit as we go through. Here we go. Is there sound? Yeah. Okay, so I guess this is me. This is Mary, the founder of Follow the Honey. This is Rogers, our photographer. This is David Kamara, the founder of National Beekeeping Supplies. This is me again, and then the former Prime Minister of Tanzania, Mzee Pinda. This is in Katavi. So these are all sort of key players in Follow the Honey Tanzania. We have a 90-year-old beekeeper here. This is a stingless beehive that we're extracting from a termite mound in Tanzania. So it's a different species of bee. It's a stingless bee. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But to get to it, we had to dig into this termite mound. This is a queen termite, if you haven't seen one before. And we found her right at the entrance to the stingless beehive. So these stingless bees have found a way to basically build their nests right where the queen and where the most protected spot of the termite mound is. So there she is, my hand. And then this is after we've sort of gone through the termite mound, pulling out the hive as it is. So it's pretty massive. The hole in the middle there is for drainage, and I'll ask where it goes. But they've built drainage systems. They're incredible. It's like a chicken and the egg question. You know, which one came first? These bees, the termites. Mind blowing. So it's hard to see this, but this is really the ball. This lighter color is the nucleus of the hive. So that's really the home of the stingless bees. And then on the outside, you've got honey pots. So it's a different configuration than the comb honey that you are used to seeing, maybe. And you can see pollen, the bright yellow, and then the dark is the honey. So what we're doing is we're taking off the clay that you saw, and we're going to take that hive and we're going to put it into a box. And so this is the first one that we extracted from a turbine mound, and we've split this one, and we now have 5 stingless beehives that we're managing in this area. So just in terms of beekeeping, there's, I think there's over 14,000 species of bee in the world that we know of. And only a handful of those really are collectors and producers of honey. But these stingless bees are one of those. And these stingless bees, there's multiple species of these, and they're found in tropical climates, subtropical climates in Central Latin America, over through Africa and India, Indonesia. Sorry about the darkness there. Yeah, well, this is just happening at night because that's when we had time to do it. But, when we're actually working with stinging bees, as you'll see later, different species, of course, we work with bees at night because African bees are a little bit more to be aggressive than their European counterparts. So yeah, that's after. There's some log hives here, some different Kenyan top bar hives. So here we're going to go into a traditional log hive. But this is the co-founder and a 90-year-old beekeeper who's been beekeeping for 60 years, and we gave him his first protective equipment. He'd been getting stung for 60 years, so he was so happy when we gave it to him and he finished getting it on that he picked up David. He's never seen a 90-year-old so mobile. But yeah, so we're smoking these quite a bit. They're pretty agitated. This gentleman has 130 hives, and 110 of them were occupied with bees of this traditional hive. So they're not happy. I'm filming this on my iPhone, and they're not happy with us, and they're going toward the light, which is why you beekeep at night, is that you don't want them following you. What's that? I did have gear. I was filming this. I was trying to hold different pieces and film this, so I hardened my film. So there's inside the hive. See the comb. So the hive is just woven from grass and put together with mud and manure and straw, basically. But it's very structurally sound. So this is chia. We're working to, mean, bees are, of course, pollinators. So what are they pollinating? They're pollinating all kinds of food. There was coffee. There's vanilla. So we're planting fields of chia. We're working on developing coffee plantations and all the things. So we're not looking just at the honey piece of it, but we're also looking at other byproducts of bees, honey, beeswax, propolis, bees themselves, of course. But then if you look at honeybees as a platform as pollinators, what are they pollinating? They're pollinating our food. And in the U.S., for example, the main economic benefit that we get from honeybees, and that I think our society sees in honeybees, is actually their pollination services, which are valued multi-times that of the honey which they're producing. So the almond crop in California, for example, we ship in, I mean, I grew up in the Central Valley, but it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and all these farmers need honeybees to pollinate and increase the yields of their almonds. So they pay a lot of money to have honeybees brought in to pollinate their crops. So yeah, I guess as far as, there's just a little bit of Tanzania. I hope that gets some things going, and it feels like you can ask some questions on that if you want. Yeah, please.
In your presentation, you said you were digging out that one hive,
Mm-hmm.
the termite. What do you call it? Termite bee?
It's a termite mound.
Termite mound.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said you split the hive into 4.
Yeah.
And we saw that queen. So how does that work? Does queen stay with?
Yeah. Thank you.
I just don't understand the science of it.
You know, a lot of people don't, including me in a lot of ways. The queen that you see here is a queen termite, actually. So there's two sort of organisms here. You have the termite mound and the termites, and then within that mound, these stingless bees have built an entrance in a tunnel all the way down to their own nest, which is protected by propolis, so that the termites cannot get in. So what we were doing was we were taking that, and we found that hive at the base of the termite mound. Basically, we dug into the termite mound, and we found the entrance to that hive right next to where we found this queen termite, which is, in theory, the most protected part of the mound, right? You have to get through all the guards, and you can see, people are getting bitten by the termites and all these other things. Yeah, but so the stingless bee hive, in terms of splitting, we took that hive, right? We broke this clay off from the edges, and we put the entire hive into a box, basically. The next day, we came out, and they were already building tunnels to the holes in that hive. So they were already establishing a new home, if you will, inside this box. To split it, that lighter colored propolis, let's see here. Yeah, here we go. You can see here, that's really the nucleus of the hive. And so you take a piece of that, and they will start, and some of the honey and the pollen, and they will start building a new hive. So that's what I mean when we split it. We started with this one, and we put it into that box that you saw at the end of the video, if you could see with the lighting. But then they will build a new hive in that box too. No, I mean, we didn't see any queen in here, and I actually don't even understand how it works. This is a technique that David was showing me, Kamara, our co-founder, was showing me. And he couldn't explain to me where the queen was, So I'm saying, like, how are they reproducing and building a hive? So we just don't understand. I don't know. But we have 5 of these hives now. So something's working.
I have another question.
Yes.
on that topic, on the science of it.
Hmm.
And was that a single occurrence to have the bees build a nest in the termite mound, or do they always do that?
So yeah, thank you. They'll do it in trees. They'll do it in termite mounds. They're not particular to termite mounds.
Okay.
In this area in the northwest of Tanzania, yeah, west of Lake Victoria, we've found these bees to be nested in termite mounds.
Do you know if has anybody looked at if there is a synergy between the two species? What are they giving to each other?
Well, I would love to know what the stingless bees are giving to the termites. I understand I think I understand what the termites are giving to the stingless bees. Of course, is protection, because they do bite. But I hope that I'm sure there are people that are looking into this, and I'd be curious to know what they're finding, because it's an amazing discovery to do something like this, and dig this out of a place and say, how are these two, to see it so clearly, these two organisms living together like this, which clearly the termites would eat the stingless bees if they could get to them,
But there's no physical connection between the two?
I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. So.
So I'm just thinking about what could the stingless bees do for the termites, right? And I think one thing they could do is help with thermal regulation. So they might help keep that middle of the nest warm, and maybe that's why the queen termite was there. If the termites could get into their hive, I would say food, but it sounds like they don't really go in and out. So that's just a speculation. But I also have a question. How do you find these nests? Like, what do you look for when you're looking for a stingless bee nest when it's underground?
So you look for the entrance.
Do you like beeline? Do you follow them?
They're very small.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the entrance, and that entrance is really no bigger than a dime.
Right. It's like something you can step over. Right?
Yeah, and the termite mound, is half the size of a sedan. So it's not a needle in a haystack.
Right.
But people look, and I've had friends. I started beekeeping in West Africa and Guinea. I was a Peace Corps volunteer there, and that was one of my projects after, of course, cashew fruit juice and this and that, and we're continuing to work there. And after discovering this, I called my partner, who I still work with in Guinea, and told him about these bees, and he said, "Oh, I know about those." I'm like, "What?" They're stingless. They don't sting you. It doesn't mean anything to you. So they're all over the place. It turns out, and if you know how to look for them, which I don't, because I didn't grow up in this area, and it's funny because I'm so oblivious to so many things, and living in another culture, going to other places, exposes you tremendously to realizing that you actually don't know very much. So yeah, for me, I'm like, how did you know that this was here? Because we trekked through like 3 acres of jungle to get to this thing. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know where 3 more are, and half a mile away, and blah blah." And so, like, how did you discover these? So, yeah, people know the land that they grew up on. These are native, people native to this area, and so they know how to look for these things.
Cool.
Hi. So I was wondering, we were talking, you mentioned the bee problems that we've had here, in North America, and so I was wondering if West African bee populations are having the same problem of like spontaneous failure, and if that could also be from similar sources, of like pollinating monocultures and stuff like that.
Sure. So disclosure is that I'm not a scientist, but I've spoken with a lot of scientists, and so my understanding is really, if we put it in the context of the CCD, or the colony collapse disorder, which it's been labeled in a lot of cases here, there's a couple major factors, really kind of three, I'd say. One is the varroa destructor, the varroa mite, that the bees face here, which exists in other parts of the world, but with this Italian bee species in particular, and sort of in favor for an African bee, is that African bees are better groomers. They're better at cleaning themselves off, getting the mites off of themselves, and they also swarm more frequently. And so swarming is where a colony will split or leave an existing hive to find a new home, or expand basically their colonies, which can leave behind a lot of disease and filth that has accumulated in hives. While they're constantly cleaning these hives, if you're talking about pests in a hive, just cleaning out dead bees is not going to get rid of them. So there's a couple factors there just in the species of bee that differ between your Apis mellifera and the ones that we know as Africanized or African bees, which actually really get a bad rap. They're just more aggressive. The term Africanized is an interesting stigma. They're just, whereas an African would just say, those are just bees, those are Africanized. Well, Italian bees are immigrants here as well. They're not native to America, the honeybees that we collect honey from here. And then the second factor would be, of course, neonicotinoids and pesticides that widespread use of on certain crops here, which affect the nervous systems of the pests, also have an impact on bee populations, and then the climates that they're exposed to. So an Italian honeybee, even living in the Northeast, I think there's a morbidity rate of 40% up in the Northeast, somewhere in that line. So if you think about, I've got 10 hives, only 6 of them might make it through the winter. So those are the three, so those are the three sort of the pests, especially the varroa. And if anyone wants to do this exercise, I thought it was cool. It's just go like this, please, and then go like this. Okay, you didn't have to do that. Just this. But that, relative to a human and a honeybee, that's the size of a varroa mite. So think about that being like actually on your back, burrowed into your neck, like leeching, sucking your blood. For those of you who are online, it's about the size of a basketball. So yeah, those are the neonicotinoids, pesticides, and then the climate. So those are some of the factors. Yes. Oh, microphone should be in the middle.
I'm just guessing that bees relying on pollen would need to be living where there were abundance of plants, and I'm thinking about areas in Africa, some of which are desert-like, so those wouldn't be good areas for bees, right? So they kind of need to be in the greener areas of Africa. Yes?
Yes, except that we find bees in places that don't appear to be green. I lived also in Mali for half a year in the Sahelian belt, and it got really, really dry. So we have to remember that bees do forage. They go up to about 3 to 5 miles. That number is disputed in a radial pattern from their hive. But they also store honey, and they can eat honey. So they have access to water in different ways. I mean, because honey has water in it as well. So it has to have a rainy season of sorts, or it has to have some sort of water flowing through. They need water and pollen and nectar. So, yep.
Thank you. This is a great ongoing presentation. I'm very curious about which graduate school you're in. I hear you using a lot of talking about traditional ecological knowledge, ethnobiology. I'm very curious, what is your graduate degree and what are you working on?
It's nothing really interesting. I hope you all continue to pursue. Well, not if you aren't. Oh, I'm like ready to pull the microphone. So I'm studying business at Boston University, hence the launching of Enterprise and International Relations. My undergrad, I actually started out studying environmental science, and then studied also criminal justice and entrepreneurship. But now I'm also finishing my second master's at Boston University in International Relations, and now studying Swahili, sort of so that I can get back and run this newer company more fully. My experience with beekeeping and the scientific piece of it is really through just working with honeybees and my hands-on experience, starting out in Guinea, working in villages in Guinea, and then the Gambia, and then Mali a bit, and now, of course, Tanzania. So there's been sort of a divide in my life between my studies and my practical applications of those studies, and really my interests being more deep into agriculture, I think. But, I mean, I grew up in Davis, California, and so I'm, again, in the heart of one of the great agricultural areas of the country, or the world. And my parents were both into agriculture. My dad studied agricultural economics, and then I volunteered a little bit for some co-ops, and then I worked on an organic apple and pear orchard in northern France. After I graduated from college, I traveled, and that exposed me not only to wonderful fruits and means for organic pest control, but also they had beehives there, which I was fascinated with, even though I'm also actually allergic to bees, by the way. So I do wear suits when I beekeep, and when I say allergic, I won't go into anaphylactic shock, but I get severe localized reactions. Maybe I should search for a photo of my face, But yeah, most of my interests in terms of application, I think, are in the agricultural piece of it. And what fascinates me about what Follow the Honey is doing is it's really trying to take a human component and the agricultural component and say, how do we connect these two to the world in a way that the world recognizes the value that's there and underlying these things. So that's, I think that it's not just the scientific piece, it's not just the organizational development piece. It's the two together, and then the ability to connect with people from both from both perspectives. So that's what I'm studying. Thank you.
I have another question. The first question is, what is your dream goal for Follow the Honey? What would you like to see coming out of this? And the second question is, can you tell us more about the challenges that you have faced in working with the Tanzanian government and the U.S. government to make this happen?
Sure. Thank you. I think where I want Follow the Honey to be is a sustainable company. And when I say sustainable, We have a lot of social components. I mean, we're built on social components, I mean, connecting beekeepers and their products to markets around the world. We're really concerned about the human element. We're saying that, of course, we're concerned about bees, but who are going to be the tenders of those bees going forward? It's humans. Who are going to be the protectors and stewards of those bees going forward? It's people. And to live, we do need to get paid. And so while these endeavors are great, at the end of the day, you have to turn it into a sustainable enterprise, which we're on our way to doing. Follow the Honey was founded in 2011, and it's really going from a small family-run business and trying to scale it to a medium-sized business so that we can, touch and connect more beekeepers to more markets and more people and get the stories out about these sort of things to people and talk about the value of honey and bee products and bees. So it's really creating a truly sustainable enterprise and continuing to connect some of these people who are in a lot of ways forgotten to the world, and to share those stories. So I think that's my sort of goal, I think, for the next 5 years, is just to keep working on that. And then as far as challenges that we've faced with U.S. government or the Tanzanian government, or any government for that matter, they're all different, but they're also so similar. It's really trying to, I think there's multiple ways you can look at it. So there's the regulatory piece, right? I mean, just sheer getting honey from a village in Tanzania, doing quality control, registering, bills of lading, all of the things that need to go into getting an international shipment of honey from that point to this point in Harvard Square is hard. It's really hard. If you haven't done it and you don't have someone working on it with you and you don't have a lot of resources to do it, then it's difficult. And people aren't going to do it for you. We're partnered with the the former prime minister. We've talked to the ministries of trade, the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Forestry. All of them are happy to say, we're so grateful for what you're doing. We'll give you verbal support, but no monetary support or technical support or anything. So we've had to do all that really ourselves, while we've been trying to pull the government and say, look, we're trying to do this on behalf of the beekeepers in your country, in your communities. Help us do this for you and your beekeepers in your country. And we're working not just as a foreign or an American company, but as a Tanz-American company, for example, where we've launched a company that is majority Tanzanian owned, and saying, look, the value should be getting back to the beekeeper. But at the end of the day, it's tough because when we do talk about governments and politics, interests are very different. Like, if I was going to finance a beekeeping project as a minister, I would want to make sure that I could point to it and say, look at what I financed, look at that project that I built. And what we're talking about is things like funding us to help develop the market in the U.S. for Tanzanian honey. And they'll say, well, why don't you, just put it online and sell it that way? That's not what's going to. We'll do a honey tasting too, but that's not what sells and starts talking about the value of what this brings to the table. They would say, oh, put more hives, build more hives, we'll pay for more hives. And you can give those to beekeepers. Well, yeah, give those to beekeepers, but what you might actually be doing and thinking that you're increasing production without having a market is really diluting the value of what they already have. If I've got to spend my time and my resources now across 20 hives instead of 5, actually you're taking value away. If you're not giving money back to reinvest, so it's not sustainable. And that's a question of development. And so the mentality surrounding development and how we've been going about building and starting and funding projects has been really short-term oriented. And so that's another challenge that we're trying to work on addressing. And then what else? Other challenges with government. The U.S. side, yeah, the U.S. side was kind of, I mean, the U.S. is facing people trying to get stuff in and in and in and in. That was the part that I was most nervous about, getting our first shipment of a metric ton, basically, from, which is 35. I don't know if I put it in here. Yeah, here in this bottom right. This is us picking it up. I mean, there's more buckets than this, but this is us, like me and Mary driving a U-Haul to customs to pick up the honey, loaded into the back of a U-Haul. There's 35 buckets of honey, and those are 60 pounds each. So a metric ton of honey. But it's things that you just don't think about. Like, what does it look like? Like, what? I drove out to a huge storage locker at the, outside of the airport where there's forklifts and all this other stuff, and then off in the distance I see these buckets of white honey. I'm like, that's our honey over there. But no, it was just trying to get all of the ducks in a row in terms of, like, what are all the pieces of paperwork that we have to have done? Who are the people that need to see it? What's the information that needs to go on the buckets? And even then, there's like headwinds, because you think that you have everything done, and then it gets there, and someone's like, well, I didn't like how you conveyed that information. So you should probably convey it better next time, without giving any feedback about how to convey it better. You're like, well, I put everything on there. They're like, well, it just wasn't clear to me. And I was like, well, how do I make it more clear? And then they, so there's challenges just around information sharing, I think, and just that, like, a lot of these folks who are importing things have been doing it for a very long time, and they know the systems. And if you're just getting started, it's all new, and there's a huge learning curve there. Like, when we got this shipment out, for example, it came in, I think, early December, and the agent who was the broker who basically was dealing with customs and with the FDA, I was in touch with, and I said, so our honey's here, right? And she said, yeah, it's here. And I'll let you know when it clears customs. So it came in, I think, Thanksgiving week, actually. So all the customs guys were on vacation, and I'm like, where's the honey? Is it okay? Like someone was going to take our honey, nervous about that. And then she calls me after the holiday, and the honey is cleared customs now. So that's just them checking it to make sure there's no, drugs or whatever. They sniff it with dogs and this kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. I haven't seen it actually happen. So it clears customs, and it goes to this warehouse, which is where we're picking this up. She calls me and says, okay, your honey has cleared customs. It's being held intact at this facility. And I say, well, can I go get it? And she says, you have to hold it intact. And I was like, what the hell what does that mean? Okay, hold it intact. That means I can't touch it, because the FDA has to clear it, right? And so I just leave it. I'm like, I'm not going to go pick this honey if it has to be held intact, because I assume the FDA is going to test it at this facility before we get it into our hands. But really, holding it intact means you have to keep the whole shipment together in one location and not open any of it, or so that they know that you haven't messed with any of it. But it doesn't need to be there, and that the FDA actually doesn't come to this location and test it. They'll come to wherever you are and you're holding it intact. So I left it in this facility for 8 days, and they're charging us $90 a day to keep our honey in storage there, right? And I'm like, I would have gotten this 2 weeks ago if I could, if I knew. I'm like camping out next to the U-Haul station, waiting to go get this load of honey. So anyway, it's just there's difficulties there. But in terms of the FDA, they're pretty good, except for they complained about the clarity of information, which I need to follow up with them on, because I don't know what wasn't clear about it, but to this day. So yeah, does that answer the question? Okay. It is. It is a lot of fun learning. Yeah. Any other questions about anything? Sure.
Which of the countries in Africa did you enjoy working in the most?
Yes. Well, I enjoyed different ones, and I do enjoy different ones for different reasons. Like Guinea, for example, when I was told that I was going to Guinea, I looked up, I was like, Guinea? That's in like Southeast Asia, right? You know? And I looked on a map, and it's in West Africa. I'm like, oh no, which is where I, was introduced to beekeeping and really got insights into traditional agricultural practices. Did a lot of hands-on work, learned French, and built like a Ghanaian family over there. Not that I got married or had kids or anything, but and we started a sustainable beekeeping project there, which is ongoing to this day. And that I hope that sometime we can go back and source from, follow the honeycomb source and connect from that village, which is where my introduction to beekeeping happened. And then Mali, or the Gambia, was really just training, a beekeeping intensive training. And then Mali is a fascinating country. The culture is super awesome. The music is super amazing. Nonstop weddings, just very, very friendly people. Cohabitable religions, and an amazing, amazing place. So I loved Mali too, just in terms of the people. I mean, I love the Ghanaian people too, but the people of Mali really stick out just in terms of how welcoming they are. And of course, the other cultural components that just were like in your face, the music and traditions and these kind of things that were so visible on the surface. And then Tanzania is a different context because I'm not there as a volunteer anymore. I'm there, well, even though kind of I am, but we're building a company and we have access to different resources and people, and I'm living in a different style of life there. I'm there for a different purpose than it is. It's more developed, indeed. But only to extents. If you get really rural, then where we were meeting with this beekeeper, what's the difference? And the people are great, and there's also really big wildlife and things to do like that around. And the beekeeping sector is much more developed, and I'm working in an organization whose purpose it is the same as mine. Rather than living and trying to figure out what I'm trying to do, I have a reason really to be there beyond that. So it just, I mean, the cliche is like I like them all, but for different reasons, because they're different contexts that I'm exposed to them in. Yeah. Anyway.
I take it most of the production and processing is done here and not in Tanzania. Do you foresee some of the processing happening there? And the other part of the question is, what opportunities you see in the honey/beekeeping industry?
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, most of the processing production is done in Tanzania. We do collection from beekeepers and testing with beekeepers and packaging into those food grade containers, and all of that is done in Tanzania. And it has to be because we wouldn't send out honey that is not good to the U.S., especially when it's coming in. It has to deal with the FDA. But yeah, I think that there's more value added things that should be built into the chain, so to speak, on the countries from where it's coming. and also developing the markets locally there, because there's so many skill sets that just aren't being explored. Everything, from artisanal, being able to design labels and packaging solutions, to actually entirely new industries which don't exist in these places, like Tanzania, where you can't find a nice jar to put honey in. It's like I have to go have someone blow me a plastic container that is not what I want at all, and then I want to go get a sticker to put on that plastic container, and they don't have the dyes that match the size of the lid or the container, so there's a mismatch, and then I have so I'm going back to the U.S. to get a dye so that I can give it to this guy, which is really just adding value to his company. So that's like, well, why don't we have someone that's making glass and making dyes and making good labels in Tanzania? So there's a huge potential you see in these countries for job creation and for new industries to develop. And it's not just in honey. There's all these peripheries, that you can look into and say, well, actually, if I have a demand for honey, then I also have a demand for better packaging and better labeling. So we're just scratching, like not even scratching the surface on anything really right now, which is amazing, because if you think that there's not things to do, there's really unlimited things to do in the agricultural sector and in terms of getting those products to markets. And then in the honey, I think it's really we can talk about it not just as honey as in the beekeeping sector. Honey is a byproduct of keeping honeybees, but so is pollination and so is beeswax. What can be done more effectively with these products? I was in Bukoba and driving down the road, and there's sacks of avocados, 100-kilogram sacks selling for less than $5 a sack of amazing avocados. Why is this way? Same thing with mangoes and a lot of, So it's not just honey in the beekeeping sector, it's the agricultural sector, and a lack of an ability to get these things to a market in a timely fashion, or to discover or build the markets. So I think much more investment in connecting production to markets and developing the markets that are willing to pay for those things. So, other questions? Yes. Yeah, Harvard. Yeah, we have a brick and mortar in Harvard Square when we have honey on tap. You've been there, and I have some honey here that you can taste if you want. So maybe we'll wrap up, and if you guys want to try a little honey, we can do that. Unless there's any other questions, but you can all ask me questions when we're trying honey. These I have many honeys from Tanzania, but today we also source honey from here in Massachusetts over to the bayous of Louisiana, and of course I have Tanzania Asali here. Asali just means honey in Kiswahili. So yeah, if you want to taste honey from Tanzania, please do. And I think that probably concludes the talk. So, thank you.
Lesson learned students who are receiving credit currently for this lesson learned. Outside of it for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I should. It's so nice of you. Can I take this thing down? Just here's this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yep.